Welcome to the debate. Today we're training our analytical lens on a social laboratory that is, frequently dismissed as lowbrow entertainment, yet it consistently offers some of the most raw, unadulterated data on human nature under extreme pressure. I am talking, of course, about the Love Island All-Stars Villa. But I want to frame this differently, right out of the gate. We aren't looking at a holiday romance show. We are looking at a moral panopticon, a high-stakes environment where privacy is basically non-existent and the biological imperative to find a mate is pitted directly against the social imperative to maintain group cohesion.
It's a fascinating, if somewhat terrifying case study. And frankly, the all-stars element that adds a layer of history and pre-existing relationships that makes the data even richer. I mean, these people know the game, which makes their failures to play it socially even more striking. What we're seeing this season, particularly in the last, 48 hours, is the rapid disintegration of the social contract. We have two seismic events shaking the villa. The, quote, the betrayal of Tommy by his self-proclaimed best friend Sean over Lucinda, and the total emotional collapse of Curtis following Millie's sudden and frankly brutal pivot to Zach.
Precisely. And this gets us to the core question we need to wrestle with today. When you take human beings and place them in a hyper-accelerated environment, like the villa, a place where time is distorted, options are artificially limited, does the pursuit of a genuine romantic connection, what they all call following the spark, justify violating social contracts like friendship or loyalty? My argument is going to be uncomfortable, perhaps even for you. I believe that the villa is designed specifically for romantic selfishness. What the group is labeling as betrayal is actually radical honesty. In this game, the spark must take precedence.
And see, that's where I have to draw a hard line. I would argue that basic human decency and social contracts, what the boys might call the bro code, which is really just a colloquialism for loyalty norms that has to exist even within the confines of a game. When we see behaviors that the group as a whole labels vile or disgusting, we aren't seeing gameplay, we are seeing a fundamental failure of empathy. Integrity isn't just about being honest with your own feelings, it's about how you treat the people you leave behind in the dust.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. Because the manner of the leaving is what everyone, both in the villa and at home, is up in arms about. I want to start with my position on the environment itself, just to set the stage. The villa creates a massive state of cognitive dissonance. For our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, that's the mental discomfort you feel when you hold two contradictory beliefs. In the villa, the contradiction is, I'm here to find love at all costs, versus, I'm here to make friends and be a good person. You literally cannot do both perfectly when the resources, in this case romantic partners, are scarce.
That's a fair definition, but doesn't that just excuse bad behavior a little too easily? It feels like a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad manners.
Not excuse it, but contextualize it. I look at Sean and Millie and I don't see villains. I see people acting on, natural occurrences. Sean explicitly said, I can only apologize. We have been selfishly thinking for ourselves. To me, that is an admission of the show's premise, not a moral failing. He is acknowledging the game mechanics. He is saying, I chose the primary objective.
But is it? Or is it a convenient excuse for opportunistic, predatory behavior?
It's the reality of the situation. Look at Millie. She used a very specific phrase. She decided to draw a line in the sand. She recognized she had an instant spark with Zach. We all saw the evidence. The kissing in challenges, sharing a bed. To stay with Curtis just to spare his feelings would have been an act of pity. And pity, in a romantic context, is far more cruel in the long run than a clean break. And as for Tommy, he was gone for 3 days. In the real world, that's nothing. In the villa, where relationships move at, galloping speeds, that's a lifetime. Expecting a vacuum to remain unfilled is just unrealistic.
I think you're sanitizing the cruelty of the timeline. My position is really rooted in the specific moral labels the contestants themselves use. Language matters here. Sean didn't just know Tommy. He called him his best friend. He used that label over and over again. To call someone a best friend, that involves a social contract of protection. You listen to them confess their deep feelings for a girl. You nod, you support them. To then engage in what I can only describe as opportunistic predation the moment that friend leaves the room, that is a character flaw. That's not a strategy.
But the connection with Lucinda was reciprocal. We can't ignore her active participation in this.
Reciprocity doesn't negate treachery. Two people agreeing to rob a bank doesn't make it legal. It isn't just about the recoupling, it's about the manner of the pivot. When Belle labels the behavior vile and disgusting, she's not just being dramatic for the cameras. She is identifying a breach of the social fabric. And look at Curtis. He called it a kick in the teeth. That level of devastation proves that treating human beings as disposable assets for an instant spark is socially destructive. You can't build a romance on the ruins of your friend's dignity.
I see why you think that, but let me challenge you on the definition of betrayal, specifically with Sean and Tommy. The core of Sean's defense is, it's valid. It naturally happened. He admits he wouldn't turn down a kiss because the connection with Lucinda is genuine. We have to look at the biology here. You can't fake chemistry and you can't suppress it just because your friend has, dibs. The bro code is a mechanism for social control. It's a cartel agreement to regulate the dating market, but it cannot override a genuine romantic connection in a show designed to break those exact cartels.
I come at it from a completely different angle. You're ignoring the breach of trust regarding information. This is where the best friend label becomes a weapon. Tommy's perspective is honestly haunting. I don't know if a best friend would act like that. The specific hypocrisy is that Sean used his proximity to Tommy to gauge the threat level. He knew exactly how much Tommy liked Lucinda because Tommy told him. Sean then moved in the moment the goalie was off the pitch. That's insider trading on emotions. It is a breach of trust that goes way beyond the game. It's not about dibs, it's about using a friend's vulnerability against them.
Insider trading is a strong accusation, but Sean is owning it. He stood there in front of the group, which takes guts, by the way, and said, "I stand on everything I said." He admitted, "I don't know what to do in this situation." He offered what seemed like a deep apology. He said, "I am deeply sorry." What else is he supposed to do? Fake a lack of interest? This is the only way to play. Apologize for the hurt, but do not fake the relationship. That is integrity, aligning your actions with your internal reality, even if it upsets the group.
I'm sorry, I don't buy that definition of integrity. Sorry, not sorry is not integrity. Sean admits to being selfish. We have been selfishly thinking for ourselves, but he continues the behavior immediately. An apology implies a change in behavior, or at least a pause to reflect. He apologized and then immediately went back to kissing Lucinda, holding her hand. That empties the apology of any moral weight. It becomes a performance, designed to clear his own conscience, not to heal the relationship. It's utilitarianism at its worst. He's maximizing his pleasure and offering words as like a cheap tax on his actions.
Okay, I think we need to look at the specific incident that actually caused the group to turn on them, because that's where the vile label really cemented itself, the secret garden incident. This seems to be the smoking gun for your argument.
Absolutely. This is the critical evidence of the lack of empathy I'm talking about. Let's set the scene. You have a situation where Tommy and Belle are, and I'm quoting here, crying their eyes out. They are visibly devastated. And in that exact moment, Lucinda and Sean walk past them, literally in their line of sight, laughing. They were seen laughing in Tommy's face while walking to the garden. That lack of situational awareness it's staggering. It borders on sociopathic.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it very differently. You're interpreting the laughter as malice, as if they're laughing at Tommy's pain. I interpret it as relief. When they entered that secret garden, what was the first thing they said? "We're safe now." That is a very telling psychological admission. The villa had become a hostile environment for them. They were surrounded by judgmental eyes and whispers.
So they're the victims now? That feels like a bit of a stretch.
At Tommy, it was the release of tension, a cortisol dump that comes from escaping a high-pressure situation where everyone hates you. It was a nervous reaction. They were laughing because they finally had a moment of privacy. It was a defense mechanism against the environmental stressors of the villa. The group, led by Belle, is engaging in mob mentality to punish those who break the status quo. They're enforcing conformity through shame.
That is a compelling argument for a defense attorney, sure. But have you considered the optics? In a social environment like that, perception is reality. Even if the laughter was relief, doing it in the face of the people you hurt shows a narcissistic disregard for others. Bell called it sick and disgusting because it signals a total lack of social calibration. If you just broke your best friend's heart, you don't get to frolic past him giggling 5 minutes later. That is why the group has ostracized them, the outlaws concept. They failed the social test. You can have the romance, or you can have the group's respect. You usually can't have both if you act like that.
I'm not convinced because that demands that Sean and Lucinda perform misery just to appease the group. Why should they be miserable if they're happy? It requires them to mask their true feelings. But let's pivot to the other couple, because the dynamic is different, but the structural issue is the same. Millie and Curtis.
Right, the lose-lose scenario, as Millie called it. This one feels different to me. Less malicious, maybe, but equally devastating.
Exactly. Millie admits, everything I do feels like a lose-lose. She is in an impossible position. She felt an instant spark with Zach. They were kissing in challenges, sharing a bed. To stay with Curtis would be to lie to him every single night. She says, I didn't think I was going to connect with someone so fast. She had to make a choice. And unlike Sean, she didn't have the best friend layer complicating things. She just had a nice guy she wasn't into anymore.
I focus on Curtis here, the emotional anchor of this whole tragedy. He was completely blindsided. He said, I didn't think I was going to connect with someone so fast, echoing her, but in tragedy, not triumph. The issue here isn't that Millie liked Zach. It's the speed and the lack of what I'd call emotional cushioning.
What do you mean by cushioning? Isn't ripping the Band-Aid off usually the preferred metaphor for breakups?
In the real world, yeah. But look at the sleeping arrangements. Millie immediately pivots to sleeping in a different bed because she said it would be weird kissing Zach with Curtis next to us. While that sounds respectful on the surface, the immediacy of it is brutal. It's a physical rejection that happens instantly. There was no transition period. Curtis described it as a kick in the teeth. He was left emotionally exposed while she instantly replaced him. Cushioning would be sleeping on the couch alone for a night or just taking a beat before making out with the new guy right in front of the old one.
But I would argue that cushioning in the villa is actually just leading someone on. Millie tried to be kind. She told him, "You're a lovely guy." But the intensity of the environment forces immediate action. You can't quiet quit a relationship in Love Island. You can't slowly drift apart. You sleep in the same bed. You are within 6 feet of each other 24/7. You have to break it, and you have to break it hard. Millie drawing that line in the sand was an act of mercy, even if it felt like an execution. She liberated Curtis to move on.
It felt like an execution because she executed his dignity along with the relationship. When Curtis broke down and cried, saying, I can't be asked to get serious on the honest truth, he was revealing that he had invested real emotion. And Millie's response was to say, I don't like seeing you cry, which centers her discomfort rather than his pain. It's another example of the selfishness that permeates these interactions. She wants to be the dumper, but she doesn't want to feel the guilt of being the bad guy.
It is selfish, I grant you that, but again, I argue that romantic selfishness is the winning strategy in this context. Let's look at the aftermath. We have Sean and Lucinda, who are social pariahs, versus someone like Carrington, who's taken a very different approach. He's an interesting control group.
Carrington is a fascinating counterexample. He is mastering the art of strategic rebranding. He looked at the chaos and said basically, the drama is not with me. He refuses to be a second option to Helena, but he does it respectfully. He preserves his dignity. He isn't burning bridges. He's building a fortress around his own self-esteem. That is how you play the game without losing your soul.
I see that, and it's a safe play. But I actually think Sean and Lucinda are in a stronger position romantically, which is the point of the show, because of the social suicide. Look at what happened in the Secret Garden. Lucinda says, I don't want the bubble to end. Sean says, it was all worth it in the end. The isolation has created an us-against-the-world dynamic. In psychology, we know that shared adversity binds people together faster than shared comfort.
That's a classic trauma bond. That's not necessarily a healthy romance. Bonding over the fact that everyone hates you because of what you did is not a solid foundation. It's a bunker. They're digging in because they have no other choice.
But in the context of the show, a bunker is powerful. The social ostracism is cementing their alliance. They have no one else but each other. They're forced to rely entirely on the romantic connection because the social contract has been burned. In a twisted way, their vile behavior has made them the strongest couple because they have paid the highest price for their union. If you pay $100 for a meal, it's just dinner. If you burn down your house to cook it, that meal means everything.
But at what cost? You're arguing that burning the village to keep yourself warm is a valid strategy?
If the goal is to stay warm, yes. The goal of Love Island isn't make friends, it's find love and win. We have to separate the morality of the real world from the morality of the game.
I disagree. The goal of the show is ostensibly love, but the goal of being a human is to live in a community. Even on a reality show, you can't escape the need for a tribe. When the entire group is disgusted by your presence, you haven't won. You've just survived. And eventually, the bunker runs out of air. When the show ends and the us against the world dynamic fades, they'll just be two people who hurt a lot of friends to get what they wanted.
Let's bring this to a close then. We've analyzed the betrayal, the laughter, the tears, the strategy. My position remains firm. In the Love Island ecosystem, what we call selfishness is actually romantic integrity. Sean and Millie are, ironically, the only honest people in there. They're breaking eggs to make the omelet of love. They have drawn the line in the sand, and while it hurts, it is the only way to move forward in a hyper-accelerated reality.
And I maintain that integrity requires empathy. You cannot claim to be acting with integrity if you are laughing in the face of the friend you just betrayed. The vile laughter and the exploitation of a friend's absence prove that Sean and Lucinda have failed the social test of the villa. They may have the spark, but they've lost the tribe. And in the end, humans are tribal creatures. No spark burns bright enough to replace the warmth of communal respect.
It is a fascinating tension. The villa acts as a pressure cooker that strips away social pleasantries, revealing the core of a person. It forces us to ask whether we prioritize the spark or the tribe.
Indeed. And it leaves us with a haunting question for the listener. If you were in that secret garden, having just secured the person of your dreams at the expense of your best friend, would you be laughing with relief?
Or would you be hiding in shame?
Thank you for listening to The Debate.